Now we look at how China and Russia are trying to undercut the U.S. dollar. Senior national correspondent Rich Edson has that part of the story tonight. Good evening, Rich.
Yeah, good evening, Brett. You know, emerging economies say they're working on a new currency to replace the U.S. dollar and dramatically reduce their dependence on the greenback. Russia says diplomats will discuss the issue this summer at the BRICS summit. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa make up a bloc of nations called BRICS countries. The U.S. dollar's been the dominant global currency since the end of the Second World War. Republicans say the White House needs to address this.
I don't think we've given it much attention, and I don't think that the Biden administration is doing much about it.
About 60% of global currency reserves are held in dollars, though the International Monetary Fund says the percentage of currency reserves held in dollars has been falling for about 2 decades. The world's dependence on the dollar gives the U.S. economy a major edge and the power to sanction companies, governments, and individuals. No surprise, Russia's trying to avoid the dollar. The U.S. has heavy sanctions on Russians, especially after President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine last year. Though some economists say the overall threat to the U.S. dollar from any other currency is overblown.
Right now, I don't see any other currency posing a serious challenge, and that China's financial markets are closed, and anyone thinking of the yuan as a serious reserve currency would certainly have concerns about the rule of law in China as compared with the U.S.
In the Middle East, Saudi Arabia has been trading its oil exclusively in dollars for nearly the past half century. Though Saudi officials now say they're open to using other currencies like the Chinese yuan. Saudi Arabia and China have strengthened energy ties, recently agreeing to a $10 billion refining deal. Last month, China also brokered a pact between Saudi Arabia and Iran to resume diplomatic relations. The country's foreign ministers are scheduled to meet tomorrow with their Chinese counterparts in Beijing. Right.
Yeah, the Saudis have always studied that, but they've never pulled the trigger on that. It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, a lot changing in the region.
Yeah, Rich, thanks. Weak economic data led to mixed results on Wall Street. The Dow gaining 80, the S&P 500 lost 10, the Nasdaq fell 129. Let's get some analysis on all of this. We bring in Larry Kudlow of Fox Business. Larry, good evening. This is scary stuff for some people. When you start talking about the U.S. currency around the world, they get really worried about other trading partners not using U.S. dollars. How big a deal is this?
Well, look, it's something to watch. I don't think it's a huge deal right now. Just a couple things, as someone once said, we had met the enemy, and the enemy is us. So if we continue to spend too much, borrow too much debt, too much money printing, and we've seen too much of that in the last couple of years, that will damage the dollar. And, recently the dollar on the foreign exchange markets has been very soft, and the price of gold has been very strong. That's not what you want to see. You want a stable, steady, reliable dollar. And I don't think right now fiscal or monetary policymakers are worried about that. They're not looking at that, and I wish they would. Now, to the bigger picture globally, if you look at the data from the Bank for International Settlements, 90% of all the transactions around the world are based on the dollar. In other words, one side of it is the dollar. By far, 90%, Brett. The euro is second. The yen is third. The Chinese yuan is a far, far distant fifth. I think it's like just a couple of percentage points. China is a closed economy. China has capital controls. China does not allow financial transactions to come in and out. China is not a good place to invest. But I will say this. I understand, because of foreign policy and economic policy, the Saudis are flirting with the Chinese. That may be more of a national security issue. It's certainly an oil issue. I don't think it's as yet a currency issue. Mm-hmm. And regarding Russia, it was mentioned before, Russia takes a lot more yuan. The Chinese are buying Russian oil. So that's the biggest issue right there.
Right.
But basically, look, 90% of the world's transactions, whether you're talking financial, goods, services, whatever, are based on the dollar. So I don't think that's going to change unless we decide here at home. I mean,
to screw
it's not
things up.
China. It's not China I'm worried about. It's not Russia I'm worried about. It's our own macro, monetary and fiscal policy.
Understanding
that
you're optimistic, and those are great numbers as far as context for us to keep that in context. But if, for example, you had a number of countries deciding to go that way and to trade in their own currency or in China's currency, the yuan, what does that mean technically for our economy if it happened? Understanding all the context you just gave us.
Well, look, if you had some kind of dollar collapse, what you would see immediately is a massive inflation wave. I mean, the dollar goes down, the prices of goods and services that dollar buys will go up, whether they're imported or whether they're homegrown. So the first problem is going to be a huge inflation, which would drive up interest rates sky high. Middle-income people, lower-income people, they would suffer the most because the necessities of life, their own living standards, would deteriorate because prices would be skyrocketing. And there's no way wages would be able to keep up with that. Pensioners, elderly people, Social Security, Medicare, if the dollar plunges, their purchasing power will go down. They're living on fixed incomes. I don't know what they're going to do. There'd be huge trouble.
I didn't want to take you to the dark place, but I mean, I would just wanted to say what are the implications here?
Look, these are threats. These are things we should think about. It's fun. I never hear people in the Treasury or the Federal Reserve or the White House. I don't hear them thinking or talking about the dollar. The dollar is a jewel. We have been blessed to have the strongest currency in the world, really for most of the 20th century, but certainly since World War II and what was called then the Bretton Woods arrangements at Mount Washington in New Hampshire. I mean, this is a blessing. We don't ever want to lose that for economic reasons. As I said, we want price stability, but for energy reasons and also for national security reasons. We don't want to lose that. The United States should always be the leading economy in the world, and the dollar, I call it King Dollar. I coined that phrase many years ago, and it caught on. We want to keep King Dollar. Now, we have friendly relations with the euro, and we have friendly relations with the yen. We don't have friendly relations with China right now. That's going to be an ongoing problem. But the yuan, I don't see that as a threat. Again, I have seen the enemy, and the enemy is us.
Larry, we always appreciate your commentary on here.
Thank you, Brett.
Thanks.
Thank you.